This is our last session today with lightning talks. This is basically a bit like mini keynotes where we have got shorter talks, but again, people talking about their lived experience as engineers. And we also have got Georgina Hawkins, who is going to talk about the Open University career and employability support. She's putting a lot of career things together for the Open University and has got very good contacts to industry. And she will talk a little bit about this. I mean, some of you might be familiar with it, but it will be a good reminder for all of us to hear about this. This is coming after Rebecca's talk. So maybe I'll hand over to Rebecca. You've already met Rebecca briefly as a panelist, and now you'll find out much more about Rebecca's career as an environmental engineer. So over to you, Rebecca.
Great, thanks, Claudia. I'll just take control like you recommended. There we go. So I've titled my talk Experiences as a Woman in Consulting. But I do think, the things that I'm going to talk about and some of the general experiences are applicable to everyone. So hopefully that doesn't turn anyone off. A little bit about me, just as a refresher for those who maybe didn't catch the panel talk this morning. So my background is in environmental engineering. I'm originally from Canada, where I did my undergraduate and master's studies, specializing in environmental engineering. And we had a really good undergraduate and master's program that had a lot of industry connections. So the project that I actually ended up doing during my master's was sponsored by a nearby company, and had real life applications to what a remediation technology that they were trying to improve to clean up contaminated soil. So then after I finished my master's, I basically went and started working for that same company. So I worked with that company, Geosyntec Consultants, in Canada for about 5 years, from 2017 to 2022. And then recently I've relocated over to the UK. So I work remotely a lot of the time from Milton Keynes, but my office is either in Bristol or Manchester, depending on which one I want to go to. So for those of you who might not know much about environmental consulting or remediation, basically it's, taking principles of environmental engineering and using them to solve environmental problems. So my specialization in remediation is, if you think about, a lot of old industrial sites back in their heyday when they were operating, regulations on how they handled waste or disposed waste, or even just, their processes weren't very well regulated. So as a result, basically all over the world, there's lots of sites that are contaminated. And depending on, the types, amounts, and locations of contamination, this can pose risks to humans, this can pose risks to drinking water, and other receptors as well. So I, work with my colleagues, so not just environmental engineers, but we, work with chemists and hydrogeologists, biologists, to try to figure out, where is this contamination in the ground? Obviously, it's not, you can't simply see it. You have to use, advanced techniques often to try to figure that out. And then depending on the type of contaminant, there's lots of different remediation technologies that you can use. So some of the photos are just some examples of different sites I've worked on. So the top left there, let's see if I can use the pointer. This top left one, this was when I first started. I was hired to work in Canada, but we had a big project in New Jersey in the States. So I lived down there for quite a while. So that was a thermal treatment system. So you can imagine if you're using thermal remediation properties, trying to heat the soil to destroy contaminants, and then these hoses here are us, managing the vapors at the ground surface that result from that. On the right here, this is a more recent project in near Devon, actually, so in the UK here, where contaminations, not just in soil and groundwater, but can also get into sediment. So doing some investigation to figure out where that contamination and sediment is. And then the bottom left here, there was a really interesting project I got to work on in near Toronto, actually. So there was historically a river flowed, south of Toronto into one of the Great Lakes. During development of the city of Toronto, they historically rerouted that river, but because they changed the path of it, it resulted in a lot of flooding. So to reduce flooding, they wanted to renaturalize the river and put it in its original course. But to do that, they had to put it through an area that had lots of contamination. So we had to come up with a way to, cut off and make sure the river was not going to be in the contaminated area when it was moving. So those are some of the examples of the types of field work that I've done. Things I don't have photos of, but do a lot of on a day-to-day basis as a consultant would be data analysis, numerical modeling, trying to make models of these complex environmental systems and managing different projects. So as I've moved between different geographies or even just worked in different areas, I've got to experience, how different cultures and workplaces might vary. So when I was first starting out in Canada, I was really lucky to have a team that was predominantly led by and composed of women, which was, and still is uncommon in a lot of engineering workplaces. Then when I went to the States, I was doing a lot of field work. So a lot of my colleagues were women down there working in the field, but on a day-to-day basis, when we're interacting with various subcontractors and drillers and things, those are predominantly men. So trying to, maintain professionalism and maintain, often I end up working with folks who maybe have a lot more years of experience than I do. So trying to maintain a good relationship so they still respect you in the workplace. And then now that I'm over in the UK, the work culture I find here is a bit different again. So I think there's, fewer women in leadership roles has been my experience so far, but I think that is changing even in the 2 years since I've been here. And then this is my last slide before we go to questions. So just reflecting on what are some of the opportunities and challenges that I've experienced as a woman in consulting. I think one of the big things is the importance of mentorship. And this applies to everyone, but I think especially to women, it can be really helpful, whether you're looking to start a career in engineering or to progress through your career, to identify, someone who could be a mentor to you to help you, navigate various technical and non-technical goals you may have. And then depending on where you are, it might be helpful in your workplace to try to start a women's group. So mentoring doesn't just have to be one-to-one, but you can, have a group mentoring environment with some of your peers as well. Secondly, I think networking is really important as well, just to, build that network of folks you trust around you. And this is, something you can be doing now from when you're in school, and then onwards as you, go into your career. You'd be surprised how many times you're going to go back to the folks you met early on, and it's often more of your peers who are a part of your career development versus folks who have more experience or are more senior than you may be. And those might be the folks, 10, 15 years that you go to from now to, ask for a job or try to recruit, or try to work with them on a project. And then last part, just thinking about experiences in the workplace. I think, oftentimes women have a harder time advocating for their value. So whether that's you're, applying to a job and negotiating the terms of their offer for you, compensation and benefits, once you have a job, advocating that you deserve a raise or a different promotion. I have found, across cultures and between men and women, there are some different styles in communication where men tend to be more direct. Sometimes women can be a bit more passive. So that's something to be aware of. And then just as you navigate the workplace, just remembering the importance of, championing other women's successes, and setting stretch goals for yourself. So challenging yourself to do something that might be outside your comfort zone, but the only way you're gonna, grow is to push yourself. That is all I had. I think there's 3 minutes for questions.
This is lovely. Thank you very much. I have a quick question for you. That consultancy has a reputation for horrendous work hours that isn't really compatible with family life. And I was wondering how you were finding that.
Yeah, I think things have changed for the better a lot, especially since COVID, when folks have realized, yes, you can, work hours that suit yourself if you have, childcare that you have to sort out, um, or working flexible, days and things. I know a lot of folks that I work with, you know, after they've had kids, they come back and work maybe 3 days a week for a while, then 4 days, and that's not held against them. It doesn't hold them back from advancing in their career. So I think attitudes are changing. I think in consulting, basically because you're selling billable hours, so you need to be busy. There are times when you are really busy, and there are times when you're not really busy. So on a day to day, it may not be always even, but in the long term, I find it evens out.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much. That's helpful and very encouraging that this is not as grim as it was when I was thinking about there. We have got another question, which I'll try to read out for you, which is saying, as an environmental engineer, how much concern do you personally have were there general presidential elections for your ongoing field of research and study? And do you think that this is exasperated for you personally because of your experience as a woman? And
Like
you
these,
please answer that in 2 minutes.
yeah. So I think is it referring to a US presidential election? Is that what it said?
Um, I presume so, but I think it's
Yeah.
probably a threat to environmental concerns in the
Yeah.
US that this is alluding to.
So I think maybe the previous administration would have been putting forward more regulations and things, and then that's what drives forward a lot of progress in the field of environmental engineering, right? Because often clients are only going to want to clean up sites if there's that pressing need from a regulatory perspective. But on the flip side, if it's easier and better for the economy under a different administration, then companies might be more inclined to spend money. Um, that there's always a balance between what money they have to spend on things, different large companies with contaminated sites, and what the regulations are requiring them to do.
Do you feel this is likely to affect you in any shape or form as a woman, or is that more something that will affect all of us in a similar way?
I think it'll affect everyone in a similar way. Yeah.
Great. Do we have any other very quick question to Rebecca, or should we move on? I think we had a question that said, what inspired you to become an environmental engineer? But I think you've answered that in the panel, haven't you?
Yeah, it was just a really good, engaging environmental engineering course that I had in my undergrad. Um,
I think that's
for,
maybe also a good plug in that we have recorded these meetings and we're going to share our talks on the Open University YouTube channel. So you'll get information about this. So you can listen back to what Rebecca said in the panel. I think
Great,
I'll
okay.
to move over to Georgina.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was really interesting.